Previously on the book of Shmuel, part Bet, we saw that, let's see, Avner was suddenly a major character, right? He was both the king maker and the king's nephew slayer in Parak Bet. Um, I don't know if we emphasize this, but the skill it took for him to kill Asa'el in the way that he did, like backwards through the fifth rib,
with
and
the back of the spear.
yeah, with the back of this, like that's not a trifling kind of thing. We also saw that when the kings are absent, the generals and the troops can act pretty brashly and get to an outcome that I don't think anybody really wanted. We're gonna move into chapter 3 now, and Avner is gonna take center stage. And
Let's be clear to me from the second last week that you were saying that they were just how it was really play. It wasn't serious.
right, it didn't seem
How
like it
do
was
you know?
supposed to be. Well, l'sachek is like has a playful language to it. It didn't seem like the intention was, and even afterwards when Avner's like, let's call things off. Yoav is like, well, you're the one that started this. We didn't want this to come to the results that it did, but it just kind of got out of hand.
They are national opponents, so as
There,
far
so that's an interesting question.
okay.
Before that event, there's no indication that they were warring with each other necessarily. This is really when the war starts. And I think this is kind of what triggered it is that things went from, yeah, they're not on the same side,
Right,
but they're not necessarily in direct conflict with each other.
right. They were
They're
Shaul and
not,
David were,
right, right. Well, yeah, I mean, Shaul, yeah, that's true.
and they were like
But
representatives.
Shaul never went after David's people, and David's people never went after Shaul.
Mm-hmm.
Now it changes. I think with what happened over there, it became, let's say, the Cold War became more out in the open. Um, okay, so we're gonna have to figure out how to get things back on track. Um, Perek Gimel um, really should start with pasuk Beis. Remember, the prakim are a Christian invention. The first sentence in chapter 3 is really the should be the last sentence in chapter 2. Vatehi milchama aruka bein Beit Shaul bein Beit David. This is the first time we're calling it a milchama. So now there's a war between Beit David and Beit Shaul, which is interesting because there is no Shaul. It should really be Beit Ishboshet, but he doesn't have his own kind of standing.
We
It's
said
still the
last week because
yeah,
he was called Shaul something. He was called after Shaul, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, um,
Ben Shaul or something.
yeah. And this battle, this war dragged on. It was Aruka. Um, the David Holech v'chazek, and David, I guess, his David's side is getting stronger. Beit Shaul holchim v'dalim, and the house of Shaul, meaning it's a lopsided victory over here. David's side keeps getting better and stronger, and Shaul's side, or the lineage of Shaul, their side continues to be weaker and less successful.
There were a lot of casualties
A
on
lot
that
of
side.
yeah,
We don't see the numbers, but
right, right. We don't get more details than that. We get this interesting sort of interlude of Vayivaldu David banim bechevron. So while this war is going on, David is busy building up a family. Um, he has a bunch of banim in Chevron, Fatih b'choron. Now we get all of their names. The eldest was Amnon, Lachinom HaYisraelis. These are all the children that are born to David in Hebron don't necessarily have the best outcomes. So the first one is Amnon, and that was to Achinoam, and then Mishnehu is Kilav leAvigail. So this is to me a very symbolic name. Um, Kilav is reminds us of Kalev, which is where Avigail's husband was from. Right, Naval was a Kalibi. He was from the family of Kalev, and now they have a child, and they name him Kilav. Um, there's an Agadic Gemara that talks about how the name Kilav means Kulo Av, that he's all from his father David, because the people were taunting David and saying, "No, this child came from Naval; it didn't come from you," even though David waited the requisite 3 months to make sure Abigail wasn't pregnant. So Hashem kind of, as we see in other cases in the Chumash, he makes sure that Kilav looks exactly like David, so that everybody knows that it's from David. Kilav ends up being the exception to what I was just saying before, that all of the children from Hebron don't do so well. Kilav basically disappears from the story. Yeah, the Chazal talk about him being, yeah, he basically just sits and learns all the time and becomes like a Gadol Hador. Eshes Naval Carmeli, Vahashlishi, and the third son is Avshalom, and we're going to see problems from Avshalom later on. He is the son of Ma'acha bat Talmai Melech Geshur. He is the son of Ma'acha, who was the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur, non-Jewish nation.
She was a concubine.
Um,
Because before they mentioned the wives' names, last paragraph.
Yeah, so no, I think she's still one of the wives. There's a discussion of David having Eshet Yafat Toar. It could be that he converted her. There's seems to be a political motive to at least some of the marriages that David has over here. The fourth is Adoniah, or Adoniyahu. We'll see him later on. Ben Chagit, v'chamishit is Shafatya ben Avital. The sixth one is Yitram, and Yitram was born to Eglah, Eshet David. Eli Yuldu LeDavid b'Chavron. These are the children that were born to David in Chavron. So we don't have any record of David marrying a woman named Eglah, which sounds like a nickname, like the little Shepsula. So it seems that, or the calf, I guess. It seems that Eglah is actually a nickname for Michael. Michal, sorry, not Michael. Michal, who was David's wife from Shaul, and we're going to see more about her coming up.
So maybe just marry these wives later, because there's the beginning of last paragraph where he said that he went up with the two wives.
Right, he went to Ziklag with the two wives, and then he went from Ziklag to Hebron, and then in Hebron he has a whole family that has now sprouted up, while simultaneously he has a war going on, a civil war. We're not going to see it inside, but the 12th parak of Divrei Yomim Aleph fills in some more information over here that slowly but surely thousands and tens of thousands of Jews from other Shvatim are joining up with David. So when we say that David is being successful and Beit Shaul is not, it's not just David and his band of merry men. David now has a full-fledged, standing army that maybe even eclipses that of Ishbosheth. This One of the other things we're going to see in this whole parak is that the women of kings and who they sleep with is going to be very important to establish a power base. So when we talk about David marrying these various women and who they're related to, kings and etc., that's all of that is to go to helping establish David's kingship or the kingship of other people in the parak. Then we get to Pasuk 6, and now we're suddenly back in the battle. So we started with Pasuk Aleph that told us that there's a civil war. We took a break to talk about David building up a family, and then we go back to the civil war. Vayhi biyod hamilchama bein Beit Shaul ubein Beit David, which you'll remember from like 5 psukim previously. But Avner haya mitchazek bebeit Shaul, and Avner is essentially the shadow government here that's propping up. We don't even get the description of Avner propping up Ishbosheth. He's propping up Beit Shaul. Ul Shaul Pilegesh. And by the way, says the narrator, Shaul had a Pilegesh, Ushma Ritzpa bat Ayah. And her name was Ritzpa. Ritzpa is a coal, an ember. Vayomer el Avner, and this is to show you how much persona non grata Ishbosheth is. We won't even get his name in this pasuk. A nameless person speaks to Avner. We're going to find out later that it's Ishbosheth, but someone says to Avner, "Madua ata bata el pilegesh avi." So if it's Avi, we can kind of infer that it's Ishbosheth, but he doesn't even get a speaking role, right? This is the one and only positive action that Ishbosheth takes, meaning everything else happens to him. This is the only thing that he actively does in all of Tanakh, which is to call out Avner for sleeping with the Pilegesh of his father. we know, and we'll see much more in detail when we get to later chapters in Shmuel part Bet, that sleeping with the Pilegesh of the king is a way of asserting kingship. So not only is Avner the force behind the kingdom of Beit Shaul, he's also acting in ways that are inappropriate for him as an underling when Ishbosheth is still around. So Ishbosheth calls Avner out on this, and this seems to be the last straw for Avner. Vayichar Avner me'od. This makes Avner very angry. Al divrei Ishbosheth. Now we find out that it was Ishbosheth who was talking. Vayomer. And Avner replies to Ishbosheth and says a very interesting phrase. Harosh kelav anochi. I'm sorry. Harosh kelav anochi asher lihuda hayom aseh chesed in Beit Shaul avicha el achiv v'el marehu v'lohim tziticha biyad David v'tifkod alai avon ha'isha hayom. So he's really angry, and he kind of gets a run-on sentence over here. He says, "Am I the way you translate this literally is, am I the head of a dog of Yehuda?" Some will translate this as, I'd be better off to be either a dog in the house of Yehuda. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for 1 sec.
Sorry. So some want to read this as Avner saying, the way I'm treated over here in the house of Shaul, I'd be better off as the head of a dog, meaning like the dog catcher. If I had the job of rounding up the dogs in Beit David, I get more respect than over here in Beit Shaul. I think that there is, again, some symbolism related to Kelev and Kalibi, and we saw with Kilav before, that he's saying that, remember how Kalev was treated in by David. Am I like that? Are you lining me up to kind of knock me off over here? Hayom eseh chesed im Beit Shaul. Today, I'm doing chesed for the house of Shaul Avicha, El Achiv ve'el Marehu, to the house of Shaul and all of his friends and family. In other words, I'm the reason that all of this exists. You Ishbosheth, who are the king of Yisrael, are only by my good graces that any of this is happening, and yet you dare to call me to account for such a thing. David, it's because of me that you're not in the hands of David. And now suddenly you want to give me musar over the fact that I'm sleeping with this woman. So he definitely doesn't deny it. He almost gives him like the speech from A Few Good Men. Like, yes, I'm doing the wrong thing, but you need me to do the wrong thing. It's my right and prerogative, and don't question the protection that I give you and how I conduct my business. Okay, let's do verse 9. So, pasuk test. Ko ya'aseh Elohim la'avner. He makes kind of an oath again towards himself. V'cho yosif lo, ki ka'asher nishba Adonai leDavid, kain e'aseh lo. Just as Hashem swore to David, that is what I will do for him. What is that? Lahavir hamamlacha mi Beit Shaul, to remove the kingship from the house of Shaul, ulahakim et kisei David al Yisrael, and to establish the throne of David over all of the Jewish people, Val Yehuda midam v'ad Beersheva. So this is also very interesting. If Shaul knew that God promised this to David, then what's he doing setting Ishbosheth up as king? Right? Pick a side. It seems that the reason he did all this for Ishbosheth was really for his own well-being, right? He's like he's saying, if I'm going to be part of the house of David, I might as well be like the head dog catcher, right? I'm not going to have the same ability to run a shadow government in the house of David as I can in the house of Shaul. So, but if you're going to call me to task for it, then I might as well, then what do I need all this for? I might as well switch sides. This is a pretty daunting thing to say to a king, even if it's the king that he established. But you might expect Ishbosheth to kind of throw a fit and say, "How dare you?" No. V'lo yachol od lahashiv et Avner. Again, we don't even get his name. Whoever this was, They put the words Ishboshet in brackets over here in the JPS. Because he's so afraid of Avner, he basically said nothing. Let's keep this in mind. Here you have the general of a king who chews him out, and the king does not make a response. We're going to see that happen again in this very same parak. Vayishlach Avner melachim el David tachtov lemor, and Avner sends messengers to David. Tachtov is an interesting word that we'll come back to in a minute, saying as follows: Lami aretz, to whom does all the land belong? Surely it is you, David. Lemor karsa brischa iti. So Avner is now kind of explicitly saying, look, I'm the real brains and brawn behind the other kingship over here. So why don't you make a pact with me? V'hinei yadi imach, and my hand will be with you, meaning I'll support you. I'll throw my support towards you. Lahasev alecha et kol Yisrael, so that I can bring over to you the entire Jewish people. Will unite the whole Jewish nation behind you, David. As long as you make a pact with me, that's how all this will work. Tachtov seems to be out of place over here. The Chazal mentioned that in his letter to David, he put from Avner to David instead of to David from Avner. So he placed David second, Tachtov, in the order, which was a form of disrespect. We're going to see that comes back to bite him. Vayomer, and David replies as follows. This is very, very diplomatic of him. Tov ani achrot idcha brit, ach davar echad anochi shoel miidcha. Lemor, lo tira es panai, ki im lifnei heviacha es Michal bat Shaul b'voacha lir'os es panai. So you're not going to get to see my face. I will have nothing to do with you until we first get something square. I want my wife back. David married Michal fair and square, and Shaul took her away from him unfairly, and now David would like that restitution. It seems to be an interesting thing to kind of put a condition on, meaning Avner is handing you the keys to the kingdom. Just take the keys to the kingdom. No, I refuse to unify the entire Jewish people until my wife is brought. She'll come back afterward. Like let's unify the Jewish people. That's super important, and then we'll worry about Michal. But I think part of what's going on over here is very politically motivated. Meaning, David is saying, first of all, you don't have as much power as you thought. I won't even see you. You can't even come like to visit until you show me that you can accomplish this. And part of what David wants to do is make sure that the people see him, David, not as a usurper, but as a continuation of the kingship of Shaul. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to do that, it's got to be that Michal is the daughter of Shaul. That gives David the ability to say that I'm the continuation of Malchus based Shaul. The same way when David marries Abigail, he's able to walk into Yehuda, into Hebron, and say, I married the widow of the head of the Kalev family, so now I have some standing that comes along. It's not just the brawn that brings him in the door. So that's David's answer to Avner is, okay, let's make this happen, but first we have to bring Michal. Vayishlach David Melachim el Ishboshet ben Shaul lemor. And now David says, look, Ishboshet is the king. Things have to be done in a diplomatic fashion. I can't just negotiate with Avner, because as much as Avner might be the power player behind the scenes, Ishboshet is the king. So he sends a message to Ishboshet. Ben Shaul always doesn't have any standing of his own unless he's Ben Shaul. Lemor, Tna es ishti es Michal asher arasti li b'mea araylo plishim. Give me my wife, Michal. This is like, it's almost like dealing with Lavan. Give me my wife. Which wife? Michal. Well, which Michal? Asher arasti li b'mea araylo plishim. The one that I paid for with 100 plishti foreskins. And if we want to get technical, it was actually 200 plishti foreskins, but I guess we can leave that whole story to the side. Now we're going to meet Michal's erstwhile husband. V'yishlach Ishboshet v'ikacheha me'im Paltiel ben Laish. And now Ishboshet sends people to gather Michal and to bring her back from her husband, who last time we heard of this man, his name was Palti. Now the name is changed to Paltiel, and Chazal say It's because he conquered his Yetzer Hara for all of these years. He stuck a sword in the bed to make sure that things were always appropriate between him and Michal, because she, as much as he had to act towards her like a husband, he couldn't be intimate with her because she was married to David. So because of that schos, that's why his name was changed to Paltiel. Vayelech ita isha. So Michal now comes back to David from her previous, quote unquote husband Paltiel, and he walks along the way. So he goes Vayelech ita isha haloch ubocha, and while he's walking along the way, he's crying achareha after her. Ad Bachurim, until they reach the town of Bachurim. Vayomer Elav Avner, and now Avner, who's part of the entourage over here, remembers it was his responsibility to bring Michal back so that he could see David's face. He says to Paltiel, Lech Shuv Vayashov, go back, and in fact Paltiel goes back.
But that is credited also to Ishbosheth that he arranged that, right?
Yeah, yes, you can definitely give credit to Ishbosheth. I don't know how much choice he had in the matter. Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, they were at war.
Right.
This war's ongoing.
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah, and he could have
giving up.
He could have dug his heels in. Yeah, he could have dug his heels in and said, absolutely not, I'll fight to the bitter end. He doesn't do that. That's for sure true.
But at the same time, he is conducting a war.
Right. He also doesn't. Right. He doesn't concede to David. He doesn't walk over and say, "Okay, you're king. Here's the crown, and let's make peace." Yeah. It doesn't seem like Ishbosheth is comfortable really doing anything except what he's told to do. He doesn't have the independent standing to make those kinds of decisions. Okay. So now Avner has fulfilled the request. Udvar Avner haya im zikne Yisrael lemor, and now Avner says to the elders of the Israel side, meaning the non-Yehuda clan, Gam tmol gam shosham hayisim avakshim es David lamelech aleichem. I know you guys have been frothing at the mouth. Every day you're asking me to go over to David's side. That's it. We're gonna do it. Viata asu ki Adonai amar el David lemor, and now Avner is publicizing the thing that he said to David before, that I guess we were trying to keep under wraps. But he says, now we're going to do, Hashem is doing for David what he said he would do, biyad lemor, biyad David avdi hoshia es ami Yisrael. Through the hands of David, my servant, will I save the Jewish people, miyad plishtim miyad kol oivehem, from the plishtim and from all of their enemies. Vayidaber gam Avner ba'aznei Binyamin. And not only did he go to the other Shvatim, but he goes to the very heart of the enemy, so to speak. He goes to Binyamin. Vayelech gam Avner ledaber ba'aznei David b'Chavron. And not only does he rally the troops to go over to David, he himself goes to the belly of the beast. He goes to Chavron. His kol asher tov be'enei Yisrael u'be'enei kol beis Binyamin, to tell David that everyone is on board. That's it. We're all joining up with David, even the Beit Binyamin. Vayavo Avner el David Chevron, and Avner comes to David in Chevron. V'ito Esrim Anashim, and he has an entourage of 20 men. Vayas David la Avner lanashim asher ito mishteh. So David's gotten everything that he wants. He got Michal back. He got Avner to hand over the keys to the kingdom. So now we break bread together. Vayomer Avner el David, Akuma elacha ve'ekpitza el Adoni HaMelech, as Kol Yisrael. And after they're done eating, so Avner says, now I'm going to go, let's get everybody together, and we'll have a coronation ceremony. V'yichrosu itcha brit umalachta b'chol asher taven avshecha v'yishlach David es Avner v'yelech b'shalom. So David says, that sounds great. Let's get everybody to a coronation ceremony and Shalom al Yisrael. And of course, defeat. What is it called? We snatch defeat from the jaws of victory over here. V'hinei avdei David v'Yoav ba mehagdud. And now we were thrown for a loop. The servants of David and Yoav, who is the head of David's army, come back from a raiding party. What raiding party? The Navi has no interest in telling you that there's like a whole other thing going on over here. I'm going to assume and hope that they were raiding Plishtim and not Ishbosheth's people, but whatever the case may be, Yoav has missed this whole interlude, meaning there was enough time for Avner to send a message to David. David to reply with a message to send Michal. Michal to come to David. Avner to go to all the Jewish people and get them on board. So we're talking a significant amount of time that Yoav has been out, like, fighting David's battles, while, like we said, David was building his family. David's now building his whole Melucha, while Yoav is kind of, knee deep in the enemy. So Yoav comes back from his raid, and he has this shalal ravimam, and he's got a whole bunch of spoils, and he brings those he brings them back to David. For Avner inenu in David, and Avner had just left. Okay, from Hebron, ki shilchu vayelech bashalom. David sent Avner bishalom. He's got the king's word that things will be peaceful for him because Avner has fulfilled all of his obligations. The Yoav, and I guess something to just point out, David meets with Avner and does not mention the fact that Avner killed David's nephew, right? Asa'el was one of the Bnei Tzuria. Tzuria is the sister of David. So David is consistent in putting politics ahead of personal issues, right? We said that the reason he wants Michal is for political gain. He's married these other women again to position him as who he should be, the king. He's willing to put aside all the fighting in order to unite the people. He doesn't say, forget this. I'm going to win the war. It's not a personal thing. He wants to do things in the right way, and he will play politics even to the point of negotiating with his nephew's killer. Okay. Now let's see what happens. So Yoav comes back into town, into Hebron, and they tell Yoav as follows. Avner ben Ner, Avner, in case you're not sure which Avner it is, it's Avner ben Ner. He came el hamelech v'shalcheu vayelech b'shalom, and the king sent him away in peace. Okay, that does not sit well with Yoav for many a reason. First of all, because Avner is his brother's killer. Second of all, Avner is public enemy number one from Yoav's perspective. The information they kind of conveniently neglect is to say, oh, and also Avner convinced the rest of the Jewish people to make David king. Like, that would kind of be an important piece of information. Vayavo Yoav el Hamelach. And so Yoav comes to David and just flat out berates him. Vayomer, Me'asisa, what have you done? Rabbi Silver points out that Me'asisa is a question that we get back in Gan Eden after Cain kills Hevel. It's a rhetorical question. I know exactly what you did. I'm asking you in an accusatory way. Hine ba Avner elecha, your mortal enemy and my mortal enemy Avner came to you. Lama zeshilachto vayelech haloch. Why would you possibly let your enemy out of your sight? You should have thrown him into jail. We could have, got all the state secrets out of him, and this is a poor military decision, says the general. Yadates Avner ben Ner. Ki lefatoscha ba. I know Avner ben Ner. He came here to deceive you. Again, this is more language from Gan Eden, of the Nachash. Ladas esmos acha v'esmo v'acha. He's trying to figure out, how your comings and goings, meaning he wants to know how things work on the internal workings of the kingdom, so that he can plot a way to come out on top. Ladas is kol asher ata oseh. He wants to know everything that's going on. He was spying out for you. You fell for it. You're a stooge. You don't know what you're doing. And again, we have, just like we had at the beginning of the parak, where Avner berates the king. Avner, the general, berates the king. The king does not respond. Here we have Yoav, the general, berating the king David, and David doesn't respond. Vayetze Yoav me'im David, right? There's no response from David over here. Like, what could David respond? Oh, well, by the way, Yoav, we made this pact with Yoav, and he's under my protection because he's going to unite the whole Malucha, right? He doesn't say anything. He lets Yoav go off with a head full of steam. Vayishlach malachim, and so Yoav sends messengers to Avner, Acharei Avner, v'yashivu oso mibor hasira, and he returns him from wherever this place is, Bor hasira. The David lo yada, and the narrator over here, the text goes out of its way to tell us this is all done without David's knowledge, because if it was done with David's knowledge, that things would be much worse.
Why didn't David respond to
It's a great question. Either because, well, one thing is for sure, which we'll see even more clearly in a minute. David needs Yoav. David can't function without Yoav. So just like Ishbosheth can't function without Avner, David is not. He's not ready to do whatever he wants at the expense of Yoav's, you know, participation. So Vayashiv Avner Chevron. So Avner gets the message to come back to Chevron, and Avner feels like, okay, no problem. I'm in the king's good graces. I was sent b'shalom. Vayatehu Yoav el toch hashar, and Yoav takes him aside to the gates of the town. This is going to be important in a minute. L'daber ito, to speak with him, brashly. So this is an interesting word. They translate it over here privately. I don't think anybody has a really good idea of what the word brashly means. And vayakehu sham hachomesh, and there he strikes him in that fifth rib, just like Avner struck Asa'el. Vayamas bedam Asa'el achiv, and he kills him over the blood of Asa'el, his brother, meaning on account of that. There's some interesting parallels over here to Rus in terms of bringing your interlocutor to the gates of the city. The Chazal talk about brashly, meaning this word brashly is a reference to sal na'alecha, to take off the shoe that you have to do for chalitza, and that what Yoav was doing was asking Avner, how does a woman who is lame, how is she able to do chalitza if she doesn't have the ability to take off the shoe? She's a gidemet, she doesn't have that part of her body. So Avner bends over to show that no, you can untie the shoe with your teeth, and that's how this woman would do it. And so, as Avner is bending over, that's when Yoav kills him unawares. Um, that's interesting for what it's worth. Um, there, this whole situation shows that that Yoav is the exact inverse of David. David is willing to put politics ahead of everything else. Yoav is willing to sacrifice potentially the unification of the Jewish people over this personal feud, right? If Avner is the one who is championing, let's make peace with David and let's unify all the people, and then David's top guy kills him in this like sort with trickery and everything. This is like top scandal, right? This is when you're trying to unify the people. Don't let the head of the political party you disagree with get assassinated, which is essentially what's happening
So
over
did
here.
Yoav know that Avner was like defecting to David?
Yoav knew that Avner came to David. It's hard to imagine that Yoav didn't know more than that. That he just walked in and said, "You mean Avner was here? Okay, I'm leaving now. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing, but
No,
you know."
there's two things. There's that he didn't know. We don't see them saying it, but then there's the other possibility. He didn't believe it. Maybe.
Right.
So
That's much more likely that he didn't believe it, or he didn't want to believe it, and he didn't care whether or not David believed it, right? Let's say you're right. Let's say Yov was right when he chewed out David that Avner was really there to spy things out. Okay, so what? So he came, he left. That's over. Why would you send messengers to him and have him come back unless you knew that Avner felt safe to come back? Right? If Avner was really like, if Avner thought he pulled the wool over David's eyes, would he really go risk coming back a second time to try it again? Like, there, it's to me, it strains belief that um, Yoav didn't really know what was going on. I think Yoav used this as an excuse. Okay, now Avner trusts David, so I can get him back here, and I can avenge my brother. It's even worse that he brought him back to Hebron, because from let's take Yoav's perspective. Yoav sees himself as a Gol Hadam, right? You killed my brother. I'm going to avenge the blood of my brother. Why is that a problem in Hebron? Any ideas, Charles?
Say that one more time.
Yoav thinks that he's avenging the death of his brother Asa'el. He's a Gol Hadam.
Right. But he's not because Avner killed Asa'el in self-defense. There's no.
So that gets to later on. Yoav is going to get taken to task for this, and he actually successfully defends himself. He says they charge him with murder. You killed Avner, and Yoav says, "Well, I was avenging my brother." And they say, "Well, he killed him in self-defense." And Yoav says, "What do you mean self-defense? He killed him in the fifth rib. That he couldn't have, whacked him in the foot. He couldn't have found another way to stop Asa'el from trying to kill him without killing him. The way he killed Asa'el required a lot of technical skill. If he could have done that, he could have certainly disarmed or protected himself from Asa'el without killing him."
And that's a valid point, because you're killing in defense. You have to, if you're able to stop him without killing,
right,
that's halachically
required.
Right. Yeah.
But there's another problem from a halacha perspective over here with Yoav, which is you can't affect the murder. You can't be a Gol Hadam in Hebron. Hebron is one of the Ari Miklat, right? So by calling Yoav back to Hebron, you're essentially making Yoav safe from any sort of retribution. So maybe that's why he called him to the Sha'ar, the gate. That maybe he called them up to Hebron but not into Hebron, so that he can kind of get away on a technicality with killing Yoav outside of an Ir Miklat. But I just thought it was interesting to point that out.
Where do we see the Hebron as saying Tanakh and Gemara?
No, Chazal said that Hebron is one of the Ari Miklat. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Yeah, it's also interesting to consider whether or not the halachos of like accidental murder apply during wartime. Meaning, when Jews fight either against non-Jews or even against other Jews in wartime, can you apply the same halachos of accidental murder and becoming a Gol Hadam? This has halachic implications today when the Jews are fighting a war and there's, God forbid, friendly fire or something along those lines. Does that qualify, or do we say that no, war is inherently like a dangerous situation, so anybody that's involved in war is sort of outside the scope of accidental murder? Okay, so Vayishma David me'acharei chen. So David hears about all this afterwards. Vayomer, and he immediately disclaims any involvement. Naki anochi mamlachti me'im Adonai ad olam midmei Avner ben Ner. He right away knows that he is in major political hot water over here, and has to salvage the whole situation. Very public now. I and my whole kingdom are free and clear from God forever from the blood of Avner ben Ner. Yachulu al Rosh Yoav v'al kol beis Aviv v'al yichares mi beis Yoav zavu mitzora machzik b'pelach v'nofel b'acherev v'choser lechem. Now he goes one step further. He curses Yoav. The guilt should fall on the head of Yoav and his whole house, and may the house of Yoav never be without someone who's suffering from all of these things, to be a metzora and to be a zav, masik b'pelach. There's different opinions. Either it's someone who handles a spindle, it's sort of effeminate, or they have to rely on crutches, or whatever the case may be, and also be nofa b'acherev, falling to the sword, and have no bread. Chazal say that you have to be very careful with curses. All of these curses that David placed on Yoav ended up falling back on David and his household. The Yoav Avishai, yeah, sorry. Okay. The Yoav Avishai achiv hargu la'Avner al asher hemis es asol achichem begivon b'milchama. And now Yoav, and we're kind of dragging Avishai in over here also. They killed Avner because he had killed their brother Asa'el during the battle at Givon. Vayomer David el Yoav el kol ha'am asher yitokir ubigdechem. So David tells Avner's murderer to act as a mourner. Go tear your clothes, you and all the people, V'chigru sakim, and put on sackcloth. V'siftu lifnei Avner, v'hamelech David holech acharei hamita, and you have to make a hesped by Avner, and David himself not only acts in this way, he acts, the king is usually not supposed to be involved in the funeral procession, but David goes not even in front of the mitah, he goes achar hamita, where usually Chazal said that's where the women follow with all their wailing. David participates extensively in the funeral procession of Avner. V'yikberu es Avner b'Chevron v'yisah hamelech es kolo v'yich el kever Avner v'yibku kol ha'am. And the king, so Avner is buried in Hebron, and the king raises his voice and cries on the kever of Avner, and all the people are crying as well. Another thing Rabbi Silver points out that I thought was very insightful is that David is still acting political over here. Avner is not buried in a Binyamin town. Avner is not buried someplace where the people of Ishboshet's following can get to. He's buried in Hebron. He's buried in the heart of Yehuda town. Right? There's political undertones to that as well. Veikonen hamelech el Avner vayomer, and now David makes an elegy over the death of Avner, and he says, "Vayomer hakamos naval yamut Avner." So this to me is like the third reference to David's former, protagonist of Naval. Hakamos naval yamut Avner. Should Avner have died the death of a Naval? Yadcha lo asurot, v'raglecha lo lenuchushtayim. Your hands were not bound, your feet were not in irons. Hugashu kin polifnei b'nei avla nafalta v'yosifu kol ha'am libikos acharav. You fell like one of these treacherous men. In other words, you were tricked. This is not a pagam. This is not a lacking of skill that Avner had, that he lost in battle. He was killed in a duplicitous way, and again, this is throwing shade at Yoav. Chazal read this almost as in two layers. David is also saying, like, were your hands tied that you couldn't have come to me earlier? Like, it came to this because you Avner started this whole thing by propping up Ishboshet. You weren't in chains that you could have come to me at any time and made peace. And everybody else continues to cry over the death of Avner. Vayomer kol ha'am, I'm sorry, v'yavo kol ha'am lehavros es David lechem ba'od hayom, and the people treat David as if he's one of the family mourners. They come to bring him some food. Vayishava David le'mor, and David makes an oath. Ko yaseh li Elohim v'cho Yosif. Ki'im lifnei bo hashemesh at'eim lechem. I'm not eating anything until the sun goes down. O kol mu'uma, or anything whatsoever. V'chol ha'am hikiru v'yitav b'neihem, and everybody recognizes David's behavior, and it's good in their eyes. K'chol asher asa hamelech b'nei kol ha'am tov. Vayedu kol ha'am v'chol Yisrael bayom hahu, and now it is clear to everybody. Ki lo haisa mehamelech la'amis es Avner ben Ner. It was not David's intention to have Avner killed, and therefore David's able to save this unification of the Jewish people. Vayomer hamelech el avadav halo tedu ki sar gadol nafal hayom hazeh b'Yisrael. David even tells his soldiers, it was a great man, a great officer who fell today from Yisrael. Vanochi hayom rach. And David says, today I'm still like I'm new in this whole king business. Rach umashuach melech v'anashim ha'ela b'nei Tzuria, but these b'nei Tzuria, they are kashim mimeni, they are much more difficult than I am. Yishalem Adonai la'oseh hara kera'ato, and God should pay back the wicked for their wickedness. The thing that David does not do in all of this, he makes a great big protestation, but he doesn't fire Yoav, right? He doesn't say that Yoav should be punished. He doesn't say, Yoav, you're no longer the general of my army. He makes a lot of fanfare and people buy it, but at the end of the day, nothing has changed for David and Yoav in their relationship, because it doesn't seem like David is able to do that at this point.
His whole life, he never does a lot of punishing on his own.
No,
he pushes it off to other.
He pushes it. He pushes punishing his enemies off to other people during his life and even after his lifetime. That is absolutely correct. All right, I think we will stop here. This is the end, beautiful friend. Thank you for joining us on our journey of learning, and I hope you will tune in for another episode soon, Mirz Hashem. Be well.